Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee of Monday, November 18th. I believe there are two members of committee who are not present. One is for personal business, Councillor Dillon, and the other, on other municipal business, Councillor Dillon, and Councillor Singh, I believe, is with illness. Members of committee, we're now at the consent agenda. Oh, yes. Sorry. We're right now at approval of agenda. Do you maybe want to walk through some of the changes for members of committee, please, City Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, members of committee, members of the public and staff in attendance or watching. These are the changes for today's meeting. You will notice for delegations 5.2 regarding supportive housing group home review, interim control bylaw considerations. There were 3 delegations that were listed, one originally with the agenda, Warren Parks. The second delegation, Al Nonis, has withdrawn as of today. The third delegation is Ali Mohammed, and there is a fourth delegation, Janice Dennis, who is requested to speak on this matter today. As well, further on in the agenda, there was a report 7.4 regarding a site-specific amendment to the sign bylaw for Giant Tiger in Ward 8, and that report was published on the Brampton website last Thursday. In regard to item 7.7 on today's agenda, City initiated official plan amendment to remove shale protection policies from Northwest Brampton, Heritage Heights. That report was published on November 8th. And item 7.8, Northwest Brampton planning update. There is resized pages 7.8-7 and 0.9 that were published on the city's website on November 8th. And finally, for item 10.2, which is a report regarding supportive housing group home review, interim control bylaw considerations. That report was published online late this morning for public access. And as well, there was additional correspondence 13.1 from Rebecca Altamera, Brampton resident, that has been submitted, and that is on today's agenda as 13.1. I should also point out, members of committee, that there was some supplementary information regarding closed session business, regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals and advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege, and that would be identified on today's agenda as 16.1 for consideration to move into closed session at the appropriate time.
Thank you, City Clerk. Members of committee, are there any further changes to our agenda? Additions or delete? No? Okay, can I get a mover of the agenda as read out by our City Clerk? Moved by Councillor Bertini. All in favor? Carried. Consent agenda. Are there any changes? Oh, sorry. Seem to be very eager today, so my apologies to members of the committee. Declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Are there any declarations? No. Move on to consent agenda. Are there any? Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull item 7.7 from the consent agenda.
Okay. As there's no further changes, move consent agenda with the removal of 7.7. Moved by Councillor Palashi. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We go statutory. There's no statutory public meetings today, and we go on to our delegations. Our first one is 5.1, and it's site-specific amendments to the sign bylaw. Our first one would be regarding Ward 3, which corresponds with item 7.1. So, members of the committee, if you would like, I can move up all reports 7.1 to 7.4. We'll deal with the matter altogether. And I'll ask for our first delegate from the Mandarin Restaurant. Are you here today? Okay. No one's here today. Okay. Okay. So report is moved. 7.1 moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We go now to delegation 2, which is regarding 2490 Sandalwood Parkway, St. Margaret Deville, Church, Ward 9. Is there someone here to delegate? Please come forward. If you can state your name, and you'll have 5 minutes, please.
Father Robert Mignella, pastor of St. Marguerite Deville, and what we're asking is to have a projected image of this great Canadian woman, St. Marguerite Deville, going back in Canadian history, so instrumental in building up Montreal and its healthcare system, offering charitable assistance and care to the French, the English, the Aboriginal, the dispossessed, marginalized. And seeing as she is a great Canadian woman, we'd like to promote her cause by projecting her image on the external wall on the south side of the building, following along on whatever suggestions for size and lighting, but from basically dusk till about 10 p.m. That's right, good on that image. We would like to have her picture there. Or a nativity scene in Christmas. Appropriate Christian art throughout the year. They would greatly help our finances too to promote our cause. I mean, here's a parish where taking requests for all kinds of material assistance throughout the year from the broader community, and our streams of revenue are also drying up, and this will be something to get ourselves noticed a little bit more.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Delegate? Councillor Willens, you're on the board. Do you have a question, Delegate, or would you like to move up the report?
No, I would just like to speak to the report.
Okay, so thank you very much. You can sit down. So at this time, we'll move up report 7.2, and Councillor Willens, you're on the board.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe, Elizabeth, maybe you could just speak to the report on I know it was refused. I'm wondering if you could clarify it, why it was refused, and maybe if there's an opportunity, maybe we can go back to the group and work with them to see if there's something, a compromise we can make with this, because I know it's pretty important to this group. And a lot of these organizations don't have a lot of funding and what available, so maybe you could just speak briefly on why it was refused, and maybe perhaps we can you can work with the group to find a compromise.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The sign bylaw is the prevailing legislation in respect to this projected image on the wall. And at this point in time, the sign bylaw, while it allows variable electronic message boards that rest on the ground, it doesn't allow a podium projector with an image displayed on the wall for permanent signage. Now, obviously, if it was a holiday and you can put up holiday lights of that nature, that would be different. But this is a projected image that's anticipated to be there year-round, varying, as I understand it. And at the time that the application was originally made, the intention was to also provide advertising and community information for events that either take place in the local community or at the church itself. So that was reviewed by our transportation planning staff, and given the location and the fact that it doesn't comply with the bylaw, it was seen to be distraction and potential safety concern for drivers passing by, particularly if the message included any kind of text. Now, I understand there has been some discussion with both the councillor and through the church that perhaps it would now just be static images that would be displayed, a pictorial image of St. Marguerite de Ville, or a pictorial image to highlight and celebrate certain religious holidays without associated text, or perhaps with limited text that would then just label or describe the picture that's being viewed. So that's certainly something that staff could go back and revisit. We have had some expression of concern, like I say, from our transportation planning staff. It also does exceed the maximum percentage of the wall that can be covered by signage as a total. So perhaps that might be something we could discuss if the proposal was to be reduced in size somewhat, or at least to maintain as a static image. So I know that Councillor Dillon, being absent today, had actually expressed a desire to put forward a motion that might be supportive of a portion of the application, given that the proposal had changed now to just be a static image.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think since the area councillors aren't here, I'm happy to defer this or refer it to committee or to council when it comes back in the minutes, without actually having a position here from planning, so that the area councillors can work with, what kind of has been worked with the father and staff to come back with a solution.
So perhaps, if it's to be helpful, the minutes from today's meeting would go to council this Wednesday, November 20th. So if the motion is to refer this matter to council, I believe, but I don't have confirmation that the two area councillors will be back. Hopefully they will be. But otherwise, otherwise it's December, so.
So we have a referral. Councillor Williams, are you okay with that, or are you on the board still?
Yeah, just, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Williams?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't aware that the area councillor had been speaking to him because he'd been away, so I get some nods from the father up here that maybe perhaps that's the best thing we do, and they can talk about it and come back with a solution that both parties are happy. Okay, great, thanks.
Who wants to put the referral now on the floor? So, do you want to?
No, refer.
So, do you want to go and move the referral?
Yep, refer.
Okay. So, moved by Councillor Palashi. All in favor of the referral to Wednesday's council meeting? Okay, carried. Thank you very much. Now we go to 7.3, 52 Quarry Edge Drive, Indigo, Ward 1. Does anyone here? No. Okay, so staff report, we'll move up 7.3. Area councillors, would you like to speak? So you'd like to move the report? Okay, so moved by Councillor Santos, all in favor? Carried. And now we go to item 7.4, delegation 4, 9065 Airport Road, Giant Tiger, Ward 8. Is anyone here? No? Would someone like to? Okay, moved by Councillor Williams. Item 7.4, report. Moving the report. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Now we're on to item 5.2. So before we start the delegations, members of those are in audience regarding this item. Our city clerk has, our staff have suggested we go in camera to get solicitor advice or confidential privileged advice. So can I get someone to move that we go in camera? Moved by Councillor Fortini. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Palashi.
Mr. Chair, and I held one of the items, 7.7, so we have staff and we have also residents in the that are here today. I have one very small amendment to that in discussions with city staff. We've come forward with one small amendment. If I can bring that forward.
It would have to be at the will of committee. Councillor Fortini.
We got a lot of residents here. Let's deal with this first right away, because all these residents are here for this, the 5.2.
Yeah, what Councillor Palashi is suggesting, because it's very minor in nature, that it would not be time consuming. So can we, would members of the committee be okay to move their order? Do we need an official motion to? No? Okay, so there's consensus, so we'll go move that item 7.6, Councillor, 7.7, okay?
Yep.
So we'll move up item 7.7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just in consultation with staff, we proposed an amendment to attachment 2, the recommendation number 2, and that's that it be in principle as outlined in attachment 2. That's it.
Okay, members of the committee, if there's any questions you see there, the proposed change. As there's no, so moved by Councillor Palashi, all in favor, carried. Okay, so 7.7 is dealt with, and now we will, can I get a motion to move into in camera? Moved by Councillor Williams, all in favor? Okay, so we are meeting on the 6th floor today as our traditional, or I guess our in-camera room is being used right now. So I'll see everyone in 5 minutes upstairs, 6th floor. Thank you. Members of committee, it is now 2:50. So I guess we are, we've come out of camera. We received solicitor advice. No direction was given. We will now proceed to our delegations. And our first delegation today regarding item 5.2 is Mr. Warren Parks. Warren Parks, yeah, if you can come. Just as a reminder for those delegating, there's a 5-minute limit, and if you request more time, just nod or head, or just give us a signal. We can give you more time if required.
Okay, I'm not quite sure. I did put out a copy of this to the clerk this morning, so I think he's distributing or has distributed already.
Through
or
you.
put it on your website.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the delegates' remarks have been provided to members of council this morning and are posted on his website.
Yep.
And I'll go through it as I go through it. There is one error on here, which I discussed with our plan writer, and she and I have figured out what the issue was. Okay, so I'll do it. So I'll get started here. My understanding.
Sorry, apologies, we just can't hear you. Is the mic on now? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm looking down now. My understanding of our governance is each councillor here represents a specific group of wards. I can't see it any different. Each councillor is. Sorry? Is there something wrong with it? I can hear the microphone go. Can you hear now?
Higher.
Well, we're going above you, that's where everybody sits who controls.
Okay. Sorry. My understanding of our governance is each councillor here represents a specific group of wards. Each councillor was elected to a ward by taxpaying constituents. Their first responsibility is to the wards that were elected. They were elected by. In this, I don't totally see this happening by one member of council. Everybody else, I understand, and we're going through the proper process. Saying that, the last planning meeting, I did ask a question to do with a pamphlet that was distributed. I thought it was distributed in our email, or our neighborhood. It was not. It was emailed. So the fact that I had stated it was on, I guess, City of Brampton letterhead was incorrect. It was still put out by the person, by what we see of the emails. But like I say, I do apologize to Ms. Williams that I got some incorrect facts. That's what most of this is about, though. All the facts are incorrect. Everybody has disinformation, wrong information. There's been tons of emails, even in my write-up here. There's errors because I go on one website and it shows me one thing. I go on a different website, it shows me something else to do with the official plan, right? So I'll get going on this. I'm just going to try and skim through it. So the City of Brampton has a process here in how they decide what goes on at 23 Hillside Drive, and that's what the residents are asking for, is that we honor that process. From what we see, we do not meet the requirements of a group home type 1, and what we're doing is trying to interpret last legislations, and in that, this should go before a full review, not just a decision and an interpretation. The steps and the processes here respect everybody's concerns and rights, not just one party or the others. And I don't see that some of the claims and some of the threats that were made at the last meeting are proper, and we should even respect those opinions, right? All we're asking for is that we do follow the right process. Bramley Woods was originally a single-family detached home neighborhood. It contains the streets Hillside Drive, Hawthorne Crescent, Holly Place, Hazelwood Drive, and Heather Place, with average size lots of 100 foot by 200 feet. By your own planning, by the original planning of this neighborhood, it is considered an executive estate area. It should require special consideration and everything to that by our own planning official plan. Sorry, I'm not a good speaker. In the original plan, that's the way it is, and we're looking to make a major change to this. The homes outside of Bramley Woods proper, they are what would be considered infill, and that's where you have a group home, Heather on Heath Place, I believe it is, and various other types of residents, which are, let's say, a higher density than Bramley Woods. I read through our official plan, the Living the Mosaic 2040 vision, and in reading those, it makes this even more confusing, right? At the start of this, the facts are there was a group of persons represented by or representing Esther Isaacs. They met and discussed opening a retirement residence in Bramley Woods, as they did on at least 2 additional occasions previously for other addresses in other wards in Brampton. They met with the councillors. The councillors gave a proper reply. We'll support it if it meets the bylaws. The process was begun. they made some of their applications, not all of them, related to the building department. And when they did their, I guess, community information session and the notices were put out, I think that's where a lot of the disinformation comes from. There were people that made phone calls or whatever and came in with information that was given to them over the phone, and that meeting became a very difficult meeting. Our planner took minutes and did respond to a lot of the stuff, but even that, it becomes more confusing. And I think a lot of the answers and whatever may have been answers to questions, but didn't answer the questions of the residents, which are, what does the bylaw state, and are we following it, right? And our position is it does not. So it's difficult to interpret this bylaw as a group home, how do you put it, group home type 1 to a group home type 2. One is meant for a residential area, one is for a high density residential area and commercial area. So we're trying to use the one for residential areas here, but specifically what it states is satellite group home. I went through the relevant legislation that it had applied to, and that entire legislation refers to municipally run group homes, municipally run retirement residences. It would be a satellite of a region appeal residence. That is not what this is. This is a privately run. So I don't see how we can use that classification under the current bylaw, right? To allow this type of home until it goes through a much deeper review. One of the biggest errors that I did put in, and what I did resolve with Morella, is in her report she quotes section 4.2, which is commercial under the 2010 version. So when you go on the City of Brampton website, it actually is very difficult to find that. It points you all to the Living Mosaic version. When you go elsewhere on the internet, it gives you the 2010 version, which 4.1 is the residential section, not 4.2. So that's where the confusion is. So if you read through mine, I do go through some of that. So in that, we don't feel the official plan or Living Mosaic gives us in their wording is what's being followed here, which, especially in the Living Mosaic, it calls for community engagement before doing anything. And I don't see that's fully happened here, right? Which would be either Mr. Fortino's motion or just deciding, okay, you know what, that's not what it states, it shouldn't be allowed, and we have to wait for a review. And it still is allowed everywhere else in Brampton where the application would apply. Right? So I'll go through a couple of these. So one of the biggest items, and let me say, I think that has created some instability is we are trying to make a change to our community. It is a single home neighborhood. There is nothing stopping this resident, whether they say they're not going to do it or not, from having 6 seniors driving different size vehicles, living in that house with no real control. Under your current legislation, they have to meet 2 requirements only of the new Retirement Homes Act, and that's to have a person of age of 60, and then there's like 10 other requirements. You don't have to meet 1 other to get a designation. This is in fact a rental property. There's no other way to see it, right? Because there is nobody actually reviewing what they do anymore in this property. The ministry, you may have your bylaw enforcement, you have this, but there's nobody reviewing it. You could 6, 10, 15 vehicles in that driveway at any given time with people visiting, people doing this. It's only a 4-car driveway, right? They have put 3-foot wide, let's say, concrete fillers down the side of the driveway. So yeah, they could fit 6 cars in that driveway, but that's not what it's meant for. But like I say, there's nothing stopping them from doing it other than we keep calling the bylaw department, which we shouldn't have to do. I think some of the hysteria is because some of the answers that we've been getting so far have been so unclear and so different every time we ask a question to the resident or to the owners of Rebecca 23 Hillside Drive. I'll close. I hope you do read the whole thing. And I say the only error that I do see in this is the fact that it's 4.1, not 4.2. You have referenced in the report from Marilla, both the official plan and the Living Mosaic Plan 2040. And if you do actually read everything in them, you would follow everything in them. And some of that is, like you say, the type of home here would require special review. And the other one does, the Living Mosaic does request, or does say your first point is community engagement to making these changes. I give it that there is only 2 responses. One is this doesn't fall under the group home type 1 classification, or we go with the ICBH, or sorry, ICBL that Mr. Fortini has proposed. I don't see, when she made this decision, we have another big blue house in our neighborhood now. This will be the second neighborhood I live in that we get that. All right, so I do ask for you to review that and think about it, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do you have any questions?
I'll be taking questions after at the end of all the delegations.
No, I meant, do you have any questions for me before I go?
I will ask committee if there's any. We'll go through the delegations first, and after committee members will have an opportunity. Our next speaker, Mr. Ali Mohammed.
Hi, my name is Ali Mohammed and I'm a resident of Bramley Woods. I only have 2 pages, but one is on behalf of Mr. Alan Onis, as I mentioned to City Clerk. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it, so I'll just deliver it with your permission on his behalf. So I think I'll be under 5 minutes, Chair, but if I do need more time, I'll ask you. Okay, so dear respected Chair, councillors and residents of Bramley Woods, good afternoon. I'm just going to set the record straight regarding a few incorrect statements that were made on behalf of 23 Hillside Drive at the previous planning meeting, I believe on November 4th. And some of you were busy with other work, so this will bring you up to speed on to where we stand. One of the delegates mentioned in the last planning meeting that Esterville Manor, an existing supportive home facility owned and operated by the same owner as 23 Hillside, had no issues in obtaining a permit or license. So what changed now? That was 4 years ago, so what changed now? So here's the answer to clarify and satisfy them, hopefully. Esterville is located at 10606 McLaughlin Road on north side of Sandalwood. With the exception of Esterville facility, there are no other homes on that stretch of McLaughlin, not at all. The rest of the land is only bush. Across the 4 lanes of McLaughlin is bush, followed by homes backing onto the bush. Esterville also has a large parking lot at the back of the house, whereas 23 Hillside is a home surrounded by family residences, single family residences, since it is zoned residential and with no extra parking except for the driveway. Esterville has sidewalks and there are none on Hillside Drive. The point being, 2 locations are totally different, and hence the objection to the proposed facility on Hillside Drive. Now, if you check out the Retirement Homes Regulatory Authority RHRA website, you will be shocked to see several serious infractions/violations at Esterville Manor Limited. While the reports do indicate that some of the issues have been addressed, however, certain other infractions are still outstanding as we speak. Infractions range from lack of staff training, no infection control and prevention program, tolerance for abuse and neglect, gaps in medication administration and storage of controlled drugs and substances, and many, many more. Now it was incorrectly pointed out by a speaker during the last meeting that the same infractions exist at the Bramley Retirement Residence, which is the old Holiday Inn facility. If you look online, you will notice that the severity and the frequency of infractions at the Bramley Retirement Residence is only a fraction of violations being committed at Esterville Manor. You don't have to believe me, check it yourself on website, which I did since they pointed out last time. Please note that Bramley Retirement Residence accommodates well over 100 residents at any given time. and not just 6 or 8 people. Again, their false narrative does not help in establishing credibility of this for-profit business in a residential area. These inspection reports are available online to public. How can our councillors and relevant authorities not only let such service run for seniors, since we care for seniors, but also allow licensing another facility by the same owner when it violates basic rights of our vulnerable senior population? During the last planning meeting, a few of the speakers tried to intimidate, as the previous speaker mentioned as well, through threats and warnings. They tried to intimidate the respected councillors by using threats of votes and giving other warnings. This is all documented in a video, and recording is available on YouTube for all of us. We, the residents of Bramley Woods, found it very offensive, and we do not appreciate such talk against our respected councillors. Please note that certain speakers representing 23 Hillside do not even live in Brampton, let alone within our ward. Of course, anyone has the right to attend and speak at the meeting. However, we are just wondering why these individuals from towns as far away as Oshawa, and they registered that they came from Oshawa, were specifically recruited to provide input into where we live. Finally, majority of the residents of the Bramley Woods are seniors, as you can see behind me. And this false narrative being spread by one of the councillors that somehow our community does not support seniors is totally baseless. We, the residents of Bramley Woods, feel that negative propaganda and publicity is being used to pervert the political and democratic civic process in our constituency. We have nothing against Ms. Isaac Esther. It's just the use of the property they are trying to change. We welcome her. She seems to be a very nice, presentable lady. We welcome her to the community. I put this on record. But this is something that has nothing to do with anything except for the use. So I close my statement there. So just 2 minutes on behalf of Mr. Alan Onis, one of our senior residents who's unable to attend this meeting today, and asked me to deliver the following message. The report from the staff submitted to Planning and Zoning Committee confirms that the concerns of the local residents. The bylaws as they stand are conflicting, confusing, and inadequate. They do not serve the needs of the residents nor those of the community. We want to add that not only the bylaws be updated, but that the process for introducing and licensing corporate for-profit group homes, retirement homes, and supportive housing be improved, and to include pre-approval of the residents of the neighborhoods in which they seek to locate. We also seek your support for the ICBL, Interim Control Bylaw, which you will be voting on today, hopefully, on the grounds that it is inappropriate to allow confirmation of group homes while recognizing that the bylaws which govern such applications are outdated, faulty, and conflicting. And the following is addressed specifically to Councillor Williams from Mr. Alan Onis. We, the residents of Bramley Woods, are extremely disappointed in the fact that, as usual, you are not listening to your constituents and have been unable to understand the concerns and wishes of the 80+ residents of Bramley Woods. As a representative of our ward, you have and continue to completely ignore the wishes of the residents while favoring one single entity, who, by the way, is a corporation with profit as a motivation, to establish a retirement home at 23 Hillside. If you are not able to take up the cause of this overwhelming majority of residents, you should declare a bias or conflict of interest and remove yourself from this debate. That is to say that if you cannot represent us, then recuse yourself. It may come as a surprise to you, but one of the reasons that the residents have become so galvanized in opposing the 23 Hillside application is the lack of understanding and support you have shown for their concerns throughout the entire incident. please remember who it is that you are obligated to represent.
Sorry, I thank you for the comments, but right now we're dealing with the application.
Just one last sentence.
Okay, but
Yeah, I'm
I
done.
want you to just focus on the application, not
Yes.
so much on the council.
Yeah, it was not from my behalf, so
yeah, I
please don't
understand.
shoot the messenger.
I understand.
I'm just quoting what Mr. Nonis
That's
with your permission.
Yeah.
So my last statement is, some email was sent by Mr. Charmaine William, or Ms. Charmaine William over the weekend, and she hasn't responded to a couple of questions on there. She was quoting the mayor's office that they are going to change the interpretation of group home 1 or 2. But upon the response from getting response through the mayor's office, I don't think, who did Miss Williams speak to at the mayor's office that she sent an email? Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Williams, we had decided that we're going to go through all the delegations, and if you can note that, I'll give you the opportunity to. Now the next resident is Janice Dennis.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. Thank you for the water as well. I'm a resident on Hillside Drive, and I put my name on the list because I really felt it important. I saw the CBC article, and I'm concerned that of the regard of many mistakes. And they quoted the councillor, so I can only go by what I saw from CBC. And the distortion of facts is really important because we care. You've heard about how we care about our community. One of the facts was that it's on a cul-de-sac. Well, it's on a throughway, a very busy throughway from the Baptist church at the corner. Some people, it's shortcuts to the school. If they see Dixie back up, they go through it. We have several school buses go up this street. It is not a cul-de-sac, and that's an important, like people are reading, they can form opinions. CBC is an important group. So here we have this information, and they think, oh, well, you know, poor people, why are they raising such fuss? Fuss is generated by misunderstanding. That was one of the misunderstandings. The other was the distortion of facts. So we're trying to understand what is the motivation for I don't know how CBC changed, whatever you said. I'm going to go by what was in the news report. So our part of the objections to our objections, because of political, financial, or personal reasons on the councillor's behalf, because we do care. I'm at an apex on the street that turns. My house is here. 2 doors down is the corner Heath. It's a group home. 2 doors this way is a now lodging home with 8 cars. The driveway is full, 6 cars minimal. I can see the other lot, the 23 Hillside that way. That's another group home. So from my home, group home at 23, lodging home at number 43, my house, group home on Heath, and then to my right, on the same line as my house, so I'm at 47, then at 61 and 65 are 2 more lodging homes with 8 to 9 people, windows closed and all of this. So I bought in 1975 to a nice place to live, mortgaged, paid money to live in a nice residential area where children can go on the streets, people walk to the high school, they walk to the buses on their pickup on the corner. Now, I'm in a place that just in that little bit, from this block to this block, I've just described what we live, and there are 3 or 4 other people in the same little stretch, and that's what they see. So why? Who's protecting us? What is our definition? I've sent emails and I've asked, what is the definition of where I live? And the previous speaker spoke a little bit saying, we bought it as a single-family residential home in a quiet neighborhood. And I have had a car smashed into the tree and left running at 3:30 in the morning. I live on a corner. My neighbor next door has had to build a big box. His house has been hit. His tree on his property, up on the property, middle of the property, has been smashed. This is a busy area. Now we have all of this included. What gives council and city and the bylaws? Why isn't anyone listening to us? why are we, our neighborhood, my home, which am I being forced out? Is all of this happening to force us out and eventually change rules? How is council, why would nobody answer us about our designation? I understand I moved into a single-family residential home, and you've heard many other people saying the same thing. The issue is being very clouded. It's being brought down as a hospital issue. I don't mind a couple of resident seniors living in a home. It's got nothing to do with, once again, going back to the CBC article, that if 50 homes were opened with 6 beds each, it would almost be like having 300 beds in a new hospital. That's what I'm quoting the CBC. Well, this home is not a hospital or recuperative place. It's a retirement home. So the issue is being clouded and clouded and clouded. Can council focus and look at just the issue? Because that's not what's being done. I guess that's pretty much about it. The main thing being that we are not being listened to, and the other gentlemen have clearly covered the logistical, what the council said, what the bylaws say in that, and we should not be expected to live where we cannot be protected, where what was the issue is now changed. We don't know when it was changed, how it was changed. So what is city council? Like, we see smiles and nods and sometimes even answers to emails, but we see no action. We see nothing being done. September, October, and now November. Nothing being done. Please, take care of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, members of committee, before we reconvene, there was a request from another resident, Leslie Nicole, to delegate on this matter, so committee would have to reopen its agenda to add this final delegate.
So, motion to reopen the agenda, Councillor Vicente, all in favor? Hands up. Okay, carried. And motion to add Leslie Nicole to as one of our speakers, moved by Councillor Bowman, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And please, Ms. Leslie Nicole.
Good afternoon, councillors and fellow residents. I was asked to read this on behalf of a gentleman that is unable to be here because he had to take his child in disability. So what I'm going to do is not read it. From the comments I've heard, everything has been said. I agree with everything that our side has said. I would also just like to submit it on his behalf because everything that's in here is repetitive, but it's also very much against Councillor Williams, and I'm not willing to read it. So if I could just hand it in and have it just put as that would be great. But for the record, I agree with the woman who spoke just recently. I was one of the ones that CBS contacted. I told him on several occasions when he was asking me questions about the issue, he kept bringing it back to this hospital thing, and I kept saying, I'm not understanding what your point is. You don't even understand what ours is. So how can you write about something that you don't even know what the issue is? So this is where our frustration comes from, and I'm just reiterating the frustration that we all feel. And, I just want to admit that I have many different cultures, races, religions in my home on a regular basis. I have a disabled son, and I just want to mention that I do not need this disruption in my neighborhood because we moved in here for a quiet, because our son is being looked after by us. So all that being said, I want to thank you all. I am so sorry about the last meeting. I was embarrassed for you all, and it's a shame that it has to be run like that. So thank you.
Thank you. So members of committee, again now, we'll bring the report, but you do have an opportunity to ask questions of the various delegations. But I will open the floor first to Councillor Williams, since she was named, and you expressed a desire to address, I guess, some of the issues.
Yes, through the chair, I was just wondering if the resident wanted me to answer that question.
Well, the resident isn't here today.
Or
on behalf of Al Nonis. So for the record, you can answer or you can reply to email.
regarding the group home type 1. So, the group home type 1 in our bylaws, it says group home type 1 is residents 4 to 6 who are not related living in one home. And the bylaw that any applicant applies for, once they are approved with that bylaw, then we understand that everything goes to the province and it goes to the provincial licensing program. So the concern that was addressed to me was that the owner of Esterville could potentially just change the residents that she's caring for into young people, into teenagers. So when we heard that, we said, well, no, we want to make sure that if it's going to be seniors, we don't want to see anybody else living in that home. It needs to stay as seniors. So that is one of the recommendations we would have put to staff while they're doing their bylaw review, to make sure that if anyone comes in and under an application of group home type 1 for seniors, that they can't just go ahead and change to having young people living in the home. So it's like a protection to make sure that what people apply for and what residents are aware of, that's what they're going to get. They're not going to get any changes. That was one of the recommendations. But I understand that we're going to be debating the report, and I'm sure many questions will come out of that debate.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Fortini, is this about the delegations? So at this time, I'll move up item 10.2. So we are now speaking to the report, members of committee. First on the board is Councillor Fortini.
Yeah, I'm just going to thank you through the chair. Just going to ask a couple of questions to staff. Group 2 homes, are they allowed in that area, in an area where residential are? Type 2?
Sorry, Councillor, you're wondering if there are any type 2 group homes in that area?
No. If we're going to switch the motion from type 1 and put it inside a motion saying we're not going to allow type 2. As far as I know, type 2 is not allowed anyway in the areas.
Through you, through the chair, Councillor, that is correct. They're not permitted.
So
just maybe for clarification, can you explain what type 2 is? I think members...
No.
Well, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just very high level. A group home type 2 is, number one, a residence that can accommodate up from 4 to 10 individuals. It's also individuals who are under different bodies of legislation, so Ministry of Correctional Services, the Criminal Code of Canada, whether they are, the Youth Criminal Justice Act. There are a number of group home types 2s. Typically, they are seen as sort of halfway houses, people who are out on parole and are transitioning back into the community. That's where the group home type 2, also persons in treatment and rehabilitation for drug and, alcohol dependency, things like that. So it is a different type of group home. It is a somewhat more controlled environment than a residential type 1 group home, which is limited to 4 to 6 individuals.
Thank you. It's just to try to provide some context. Back to you, Councillor Fortini.
No, I'm fine. I'll talk later. Thank you.
You have no further questions? Okay, I have no one on the board. Oh, okay, Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I don't know which delegate it was. It might have been 2 who said that there's lodging houses in the area. Can you tell me what you mean by lodging houses?
Rooming houses. We were told it's now called lodging.
Okay. In the feedback that you've got, there's approximately 3 residences that the City of Aiken bylaw officers are trying to investigate and close down right now, and are going through multiple steps to do that. So they're not registered ones.
Right.
They're just, there's 4 residences or 5 or 6 residents living in that house, and it's not allowed by our bylaws. Right, so that's, yeah, so that's what we're referring to, and it was referred to at several other points in the past meetings.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to clarify, because when we say there's group homes and lodging houses, I want to clarify the difference between, because those are illegal.
Yeah, no, we know
Yeah.
that's what we're saying.
Okay.
We don't want. That's also why we're trying to point out.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Bowman was just,
Yeah,
please,
there's,
you have the floor.
I mean, the prosecution process, I mean, we've got Fire here, we've got Joe here, but there's a full report that was given to us 2 months ago on what's being done in the prosecution process. They're up a couple of 100%, if I'm not mistaken, prosecutions lately, but there are limitations. The province does limit our access in. If we knock on a door, we don't have to be allowed in. So there are limitations. The process does take a long time. There are fines involved, up to $25,000, and some of them have been levied. But I just wanted to let you know that this is a problem all over Brampton that we're having. This is not particular to your neighborhood. It's in my ward. It's in everybody's ward. These are illegal rooming houses. There are illegal basement apartments too, which this council is actively trying to fight. So when you said that there's lodging houses and nothing's being done, I just wanted to clarify, and I think this gentleman did clarify that. Yeah. Oh, I know. I just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware, because people. Yeah. No, I just wanted to make sure, because it's not that we know where they are and we're ignoring them. Definitely not. We are trying to take care of them, but it's just a very, very big problem because of the drastic shortage of affordable housing that is in the city. But all of us here, bar none, are interested in safe, reliable, registered affordable housing. So I just wanted to clarify that when you said that they're lodging houses. To us, they're illegal rooming houses. So thank you. That was my only question.
Okay, Councillor Fortini.
Yeah, I think there's no more speakers.
There's no speakers on the board.
I think staff prepared a motion. Maybe we should put it up on the board.
So you would like to introduce a motion?
Yeah, that's what we worked out with staff and legal.
Okay. So do you want to read it, City Clerk? Okay, so Councillor Fortini, would you mind the City Clerk read it, or would you like to read it? Okay, go ahead, Peter.
By Councillor Fortini, whereas the Council of the Corporation of the City of Brampton has directed staff by resolution to review the city's group home and supportive housing policies with respect to outdated policies, and whereas Council is concerned about inconsistencies in existing bylaws and policies regarding supportive housing facilities, including but not limited to the appropriateness of 1, the minimum separation standards, and 2, the caps on the number of facilities permitted in given areas. And whereas Council is concerned that the approval of applications for new supportive housing facilities prior to the completion of the comprehensive review could thwart its long-term land use planning objectives for supportive housing and undermine its ability to appropriately address the interests of existing and future residents of Brampton, including residents of supportive housing facilities. And whereas Section 38 of the Planning Act, as amended, permits the municipality to pass an interim control bylaw to be in effect for a period of time not to exceed 1 year, to prohibit the use of land, building, or structures for the operation of a group home type 1, group home type 2, and supportive housing facility use. And whereas Council deems that while the city expeditiously completes the study, an interim control bylaw is necessary to prohibit the registration and creation of new group homes type 1 and type 2 and supportive housing facilities applications. Therefore, it is recommended that Council enact an interim control bylaw substantially in accordance with the following. 1, except as provided in sections 1.1 and 1.2, and notwithstanding any other bylaw to the contrary, all lands, buildings, and structures within a residential zone category within the area set out in Schedule A, which will be identified as Area A on Schedule D of Zoning Bylaw 270-2004, as amended to this bylaw, shall not be used for the purpose of a supportive housing facility, a group home type 1, or a group home type 2. 1.1, a retirement home, a nursing home, and a senior citizen residence shall be permitted where the specified use is listed as a permitted use in the applicable zone. 1.2, a supportive housing facility, a group home type 1, or group home type 2 that lawfully existed on the date of the enactment of this interim control bylaw shall be permitted so long as it continues to be used for that purpose. And 2, that this bylaw expires 6 months from the date of its enactment and passage by Council.
I'd like to record a vote, please.
Thank you. So members of the committee, we have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini where a recorded vote has been required. I'll give just a couple of minutes for members of the committee to take this in. And if they have any questions or comments, I have Councillor Williams on the board. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through the chair, just do we know how many registrations or how many applications are currently open right now in this area?
Through the chair, we've got discussions underway with 3 potential applicants that we're aware of in this area. Oh,
2.
2, sorry, corrected. 2 in this area, 1 just outside this area.
And 2 in this area. If we were to approve this in the area, section 10, through the chair, what type of vulnerable sector or individuals would be impacted by this ICBO?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Group Home Type 1 and would include seniors. It includes developmentally and mentally challenged adults, as well as children in the care of, under the Children and Family Services Act, in the care of Children's Aid Society, as well as persons under the Mental Hospitals Act and the Home for Special Care Act, which is typically people transitioning into the community following mental illness.
Okay. And they, through the chair, they'll be impacted by the ICBL for approximately how long?
The interim control, through you, Mr. Chair, is in effect for 6 months. As of the passing of this motion, should it go forward by council on Wednesday, there is the potential that an interim control can remain in effect for a period of up to 2 years.
Even though it says 6 months?
If council chooses to extend and amend the bylaw, it can be amended for, again, a period of up to 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. At the end of 6 months from Wednesday, assuming this passes, what is the procedure at that time once the bylaw is done? What happens then?
So, through the chair, the interim control bylaw provisions would expire, and any bylaws that are in force at that point in time will take effect. So should there be amendments to the bylaws, that's generally what we would try and do with these kinds of reviews, that should council approve changes, providing those are passed and in effect, that's what will be in effect at the time the ICBL expires. If changes are not completed and the bylaws are not amended, then it's what's in force at that point in time will continue to be in force or come back into force.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question. There is the potential, just so everybody's aware, that this study is going to take place. Recommendations are going to come back. There's always the possibility that recommendations might say that we leave things as they are today, correct?
That's always a possibility. In this case, we're well aware that the definitions don't line up well with the provincial definitions. Things have changed from the time these bylaws were introduced, so we're expecting that there will be changes. Some of those include direction from human rights, and some of the other things that are much more clear from the provincial direction. So all that will be incorporated into it. So I would expect that the restrictions may not be as restrictive or as restrictive. That's a decision for council, but the definitions and the structure I would fully expect are going to be much more legible and will clear up some of the misunderstandings that we've seen on this file.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've had an opportunity to talk a little bit about this with some members of council and some residents, and we all know that this is a concern right across the city. You know, when we were out knocking on doors during the election, it was got to the point where it was almost every other door there was, and you think 9 is bad? I went to a house that had 20 students living in it. It was a disaster and such a safety issue, a safety concern. I'm looking at this, I see nothing to reflect that. I see nothing in this that reflects safety aspects. If you go back to the page prior, number 1 and number 2, where it says the minimum separation standards and caps on the number of facilities permitted in given areas, I really need to see some language in there that reflects, number of cars on the street, number of people in the home, and with respect to more of the safety aspect of things. So I don't know if Councillor Fortini, you can take that into account and maybe just have that as a friendly, where when we're reviewing the bylaw, because it does essentially speak to the bylaw, or maybe I'm talking out of turn here where the bylaw that we're currently working on is going to resolve some of my concerns.
So I'd offer, Mr. Chair, that we've got a number of studies and initiatives underway. So some of those are related to what's been raised as student housing concerns, and that's sort of a separate process. The lodging houses, second unit task force, some of the actions underneath there. There's a lot of different components that we're working on. This study is really related to the supportive living homes and the group homes, type 1 and type 2. It wouldn't address lodging houses. That is being addressed through another process. And of course, any of the issues that arise through the consultation and our review for safety and all of those related things would just become part of the review. I wouldn't expect that this will tackle lodging houses because that isn't the scope of this review, but it'll certainly incorporate all of those components that we need to be successful in the review. So I'd suggest you wouldn't need a specific motion to do that.
Okay, so it's probably already been captured in what Council's initiated. And then just on timelines, the ICBL expires after 6 months. Is staff prepared to bring forward in 6 months' time what we're currently looking at through the bylaw review? We don't really want this to expire and not have the bylaw in front of us to adopt, right?
That's great. Mr. Chair, the intent, we'll try and work to those timeframes, and we'll prioritize this above some of the other projects we've got ongoing. We'll certainly let you know if there's additional resources that are required, but of course, if that's the timeframe that's been set, that's what we'll work towards.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through the chair. So during this time when the ICBL is in place, will applicants be able to get any permits to do any work in their homes that they're trying to open?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, they would not. Because it is the creation of a group home, this would include the issuance of any permits to facilitate the creation of a group home. So no, building permits as well as any future registrations would be put on hold until the expiry of the interim control.
Okay. So that applies to homes that are running right now who may want to put something into their house or put in a basement exit or whatever may have you, they'll not be able to apply for a permit.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the exemption in section 1.2 that has been recommended would exclude any existing group homes that have lawfully existed as of the date of the passing of this bylaw. So they would be permitted to make any modifications to their existing facility, but it will prevent the registration and the creation of any new group homes that are not already registered with the city.
Any new group homes that are not registered with the city?
That's correct.
Okay. So just if you could walk me through it, through the chair. We do the interim control bylaw, we do the review, and the recommendation is that we follow provincial guidelines. What happens to any person who wants to open a business that takes in 4 to 6 seniors?
That will really depend on the outcome of the council's decision based on the recommendations in the review.
So according to the province, they classify a retirement home as 8 to 10. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the existing definition.
So what if somebody just wants to be able to have 4 to 6 seniors, so less than 8 to 10 seniors in a home? Do they now have to register with the city?
One of the outcomes would be that they may not need to, depending on where council decides to go. If you want to be consistent with provincial legislation, that number would not require city process.
So they may not need to register with the city. Will there be any distance requirements like we have right now with our bylaw currently?
So all of that will be determined through the review. So we'll look at it and see both on what a good practice is more generally, some of the direction from the province, as well as what council decides to take forward.
Does the province have any distance requirements for supportive housing?
No, that's not something the province requires.
And do they encourage cities to have distance requirements?
In general, those kinds of separation distances are not something that is generally seen as positive from a human rights perspective or the provincial guidance.
So if we were to have the review, the recommendation comes back to council, no distance requirements, houses with 4 to 6 seniors does not need to register with the city. These are all potential things that could come out of this ICBL.
These will all be considered in the review, and that'll be up to council.
So right now, is there a review of the bylaw happening right now anyway?
There's a number of portions that we're looking at. So the zoning bylaw as a whole is being reviewed comprehensively. Council's directed that we initiate this review separately and in advance of that. So this review of group homes. We're also looking at parking requirements. So we are looking at a number of different components. This review we've initiated within the last month or so based on council's direction.
Mm-hmm. So when will this review be completed?
As I indicated, we'll work towards having everything in place for council by the time the interim control bylaw expires. Certainly, if that's not something we're able to achieve, we'll bring something forward so council's well aware of that in advance.
I'm sorry, the question I was asking, if we're doing a review of the bylaw right now anyway, right? Without the ICBL.
That's right.
That's right. So if we're doing a review of the bylaw without the ICBL, when will that review be completed?
Oh, the overall comprehensive review?
Yes.
We anticipate it'll be done similar time frame to the official plan, so we can bring those forward together. But as I said, any of the components that need to happen in advance of that, we're advancing that. So you'll see parking requirements, amendments to those will be coming forward early in the new year. The second unit parking requirements. So we will continue to update things as we can as they're identified as priorities.
So is it safe to say that we could have a review of this bylaw as it is right now completed next year this time?
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor, the bylaw you're referring to would be for the group homes, the supported
Well, the review
housing?
of the we're reviewing the bylaw right now without the ICBL. So we're just say we're not doing the ICBL, we're reviewing the bylaws anyway. So the bylaw review for group home type 1, 2, and 3 is occurring right now, and when would that finish?
So we're aiming to have that back presumably within the next 6 months.
In the next 6 months anyway.
That's what we'll aim to. If that's the time frame that council's going to work with, that's what we'll work with.
Under the ICBL?
That's correct. I mean, our aspiration, if the ICBL is in force, we will try and get the regulations advanced to council in time for them to be in force before the expiry of the ICBL.
Okay, so I think my question is not being clear. So we understand that this motion is talking to having an ICBL put on place to review the bylaw for Area 10. What I'm asking is the policy review for the overarching bylaw review, especially as it relates to group homes, is that being completed right now anyway? Because according to the report, there is a review being done already.
That's correct. Now, so Councillor, through the chair, to clarify, as we'd indicated in the report, we'd expected that report to come forward to be complete in about a year. So that's what we had indicated earlier. We will obviously need to compress that somewhat to meet the time frame if we're going to try and line that up with the ICBL timeframe.
So we could have a report back. If we didn't have the ICBL, we'd have it back in 12 months. With the ICBL, it's going to come back in 6 months. But with the ICBL, we potentially might have to extend it because we might not get all the information that we are looking for.
I mean, we'll try and address the timeframes to compress the report to bring it forward. Then the review will be the same, irrespective of the ICBL.
Okay, so what are the implications of having an ICBL? Or just kind of an overview.
Well, through the chair, the ICBL would prevent new applications from being considered through the city's processes through that time frame that the ICBL is in force.
Okay, so no new applications can come in during the next 6 months while we're doing the review, even though we're going to be achieving the same results if we had no ICBL. The only difference is that what we get with 3 applications, maybe a year?
That's been Brampton's experience, yes, is 1 to 3 applications a year.
So we could be potentially preventing about 3 applications from coming into the city. But the ICBL would, even after it's been lifted in the 6 months, there are some implications or consequences for using an ICBL that can last longer than the 6 months.
The number that I was referring to would be citywide for group home applications. And, the motion that I think you've got in front of you speaks to a smaller geographic area. And so there would likely be a smaller number of applications that would be impacted.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Fortini.
Thank you. So when we put this ICBL, Interim Control Bylaw, we're not freezing all city. Am I correct?
So through the chair, the motion that's set out here would restrict it to the Area 10,
Area 10.
Schedule D.
When we reviewing these bylaws, on the new bylaws that we're actually already in process, we're supposed to, we don't know what's going to come out of it at the end because we're supposed to align ourselves with the provincial legislation. Am I correct?
That's correct. That's the scope of the review.
Thank
The
you.
review would be citywide, but this ICBL, I think, would be restricted to that one area.
Okay, great.
Or, okay, so Councillor Fortini has requested recorded vote standing, and I'll hand it over to the city clerk.
All members of committee in favor of the motion as shown on the screen, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor is Councillor Fortini, Councillor Williams, Chair Medeiros, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Willens, Councillor Vicente, and Councillor Santos. Mr. Chair, the motion carries unanimously 8-0.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to receive the correspondence and the delegations? Moved by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. So City Clerk, we have some residents.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so for the residents, this recommendation will go to City Council this coming Wednesday on November 20th. And if Council adopts the recommendation, then an interim control bylaw will be enacted at that meeting. And if you wish to have further, I suggest there's other business the committee needs to attend to, so there is a public question period at the end of this meeting after committee concludes its business, or perhaps planning staff will be available to answer any questions from the residents.
Yeah, we have one more item. Thank you, City Clerk. We have one more item to deal with. At that time, there will be an opportunity for public question period. And as a City Clerk, you can ask questions, or after the meeting, you're more than welcome to consult with our staff or with your two local area councillors. Okay, so we have our Director of Policy, if anyone would like to speak with him who's outside. We now go on to item 10.1. Item 10.1, I'll hand this over to Alan, members of committee. Or just give it a couple minutes. If you don't want to wait, I would ask you leave, because we just have to continue with business. And as we'll give you a couple minutes to leave if you don't want to stay till the end. Okay, so we'll go over to Alan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, just in advance of us speaking to the report or hearing from committee with respect to it, just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce committee members through to a new planning manager in our development services section, being the author of this report, Ms. Carolyn Crozer. So we're very pleased to have Carolyn Crozer on with us. She's been with us for approximately 4 months now. And that time has gone by very quickly. We've put Carolyn to work very quickly, and this is one of those items that she's been working on over that time. And Carolyn comes to us from the region of Waterloo. So I just wanted to introduce Carolyn to you. Thank you.
Great, welcome.
So further, through you, Mr. Chairman, in addition to the report that you have in front of you, 10.1, and the recommendations contained within it, just wanted to also ask for committee's consideration with providing one piece of additional direction. So committee members will recall that previously we had received council direction to implement the bylaw associated with the temporary permit process. And so that was scheduled as per committee direction to commence this Friday, November 22nd. At this point in time, staff have just a couple of modest matters to work through still with the application form and some of the education public awareness pieces associated with the driveway permit bylaw process. And so we're asking for committee's consideration to deferring that introduction of the bylaw, of the process, not at November 22nd, but rather up to the first business day of the new year, so January 2nd, 2020. So that's staff's ask.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of the committee, you have the recommendations before you. Councillor Woolens.
Yeah, I think it's a good ask, I think, to defer to that meeting. But I'm okay with that. If it makes it easier for staff to get everything together. And
So you'd like to move the recommendations?
sure.
Okay, so Councillor Woolens has moved the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. I bet you thought that would be more difficult, huh?
Somebody's not here.
I know.
It will on Wednesday.
We have no other new business. Oh, sorry. We went for that. And so correspondence, we removed it. So councillor question period. Any questions from members of committee? No. Okay. Public question period. Oh, Councillor Vicente, are you on? Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
So decisions that we make here at planning must be ratified at council, correct?
Yes.
At the time, perhaps it would be appropriate, given that we had a unanimous decision supporting the motion for the Hillside matter, it might be appropriate for staff to undertake.
I don't think you meant Hillside. You meant the IBCL for Area 10.
IBCL, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Perhaps staff could undertake perhaps issuing a public release to inform the media about the decision that council made and the steps that staff are taking to deal with that issue.
So Councillor Vicente, maybe I would suggest maybe at council you can provide that as direction if you would like.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah. Do you want to move the direction today or would you like to move it Wednesday?
I'd prefer to move it today since we're here.
Okay, so direction is some form of communication, media go out as a result of the decision on, okay. So we have a motion from Councillor Vicente, which
We're
is,
reopening the agenda?
That would be, if that's necessary, but my question was, will there be a communication from staff
so I would,
to alert the public as to what was undertaken today by staff?
yeah, CEO wants to respond, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I don't believe it requires a motion. We can just go and do that. That's fine. I understand it. It makes a lot of sense, and we should be, we can consult with communications, planning staff, and legal staff to make sure the message is appropriate.
Okay,
Thank you.
and
Mr. Chair, if appropriate, I would prefer to have a formal motion.
So Councillor Vicente, I appreciate it. I'm just, in terms of respect for the local area councillors, we might, and that's my only issue, we don't know how long they're out, and we might want to consider them, but it's your prerogative to put forth the motion. So do you want to leave it on the floor?
It's just to, there was a lot of discussion about misinformation in the media, and I believe that the record needs to be straightened out.
Okay.
And I would have confidence and faith in staff doing that work. But I want to make sure that it's understood by all members of council, including those who are not here in the room right now, that that is official direction.
So City Clerk.
For you, Mr. Chair, I believe it's understood, as the CEO is pointing out, so directions being provided, and we'll be noting it as an action item for follow-up that doesn't necessarily require a vote at this point.
Are you satisfied with that?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Palashi?
So is there a motion that's before us?
No.
Is this something typical that we would do when planning committee passes a resolution before it goes to council?
If I may, so there's some discretion when there's some sensitive issues that have a heightened public interest, that certainly staff have discretion in terms of what they're communicating when and how. I suggest this would fall into that. understanding, again, it is a committee recommendation with the fulsome issue has to be resolved at council, but it's not uncommon where committee motions get communicated and then understanding that it's a full council approval that has to occur as well. I mean, part of it is that proactive communication piece rather than sitting silent as a corporation and then media and other external outlets get their message out. I think it's important given the nuances of this and the technicalities that we do deliver the message on an accurate basis.
So kind of to, I guess, to set the narrative.
Yes.
We'll get out there before, which I can understand. Maybe though, for members of council that haven't been fully paying attention to all of the negative media, I guess is what we're essentially saying, that's out there. Maybe staff can come back and provide us with all of that media that some councillors had the ability to see and other councillors haven't, I guess, don't really pay attention to. Can staff go ahead and do that?
Yep.
So thank you, through Chair. So the city has a clipping service, and so we can ask communication staff to identify the relevant clippings and provide them to every councillor via email. It's already public information. I don't think necessarily has to go onto an agenda for discussion purposes, but we can collate that information and send it to council.
And then maybe at council we can talk about maybe looking into some of the media that's out there and maybe possibly even ask for retractions. I know we've kind of asked for that before. It doesn't really ever happen, but if we need to do that, maybe that's the discussion that we can have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're now on to adjournment. Our next meeting, December 2nd at 7 p.m. Moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? Great. Have everyone a good afternoon.